My name's Patty Lutsky, and I'm the product manager for Arbortext products, as well as product manager for Service Information Manager. And I'm a longtime Arbortext person. I was with Arbortext from before the PTC acquisition. So today's topic is Arbortext translation. So I'm going to cover first a quick overview of what is included in the translation. And technically, translation is really a Service Information Manager feature. And then I'm going to go through an extended example showing a small publication structure and sort of the steps to go through to translate that. So first, the overview. So the general idea is that within Service Information Manager, you will have your XML content, and it is then, when a translation package is created, Service Information Manager will be queried for which of the content needs to be translated. And then whatever has not yet been translated in the requested language will be gathered together into what we call a translation package, which is really just a zip file that contains a log file, a manifest, and then the files that need to be translated. Then that package would get sent out to a language service provider. And then within that system, you would have things like translation projects, budgeting, translation memory, a terminology base, and so on. And then the language service provider will translate what was provided to them in the zip file and then return it so that it can then be imported into Service Information Manager. And as you'll see, it gets imported as a separate object in Service Information Manager that is linked to from the original. And then finally, you can publish out the translated content either to PDF or to a delivery system. And so the area that the translation management of Service Information Manager covers really is this section, the creating of the translation packages and the importing, as well as the managing, the associating the translations to the source documents and managing the review of those documents. So really the LSP part, that's outside of the scope of Service Information Manager. A few features just to mention. You can manage the translations either in the product container, the same product container where the source is, or you can set up a library container which will hold the translations. And again, there will be links between the translated documents and the source documents. The translation package can be created for an entire information structure, for a publication structure, or for an individual compound document, such as a data map and all of the topics referenced from the data map. There is also support for translating portions of an information structure or publication structure, so you can create a package at the information group level or at the publication section level. The objects that will be included in the translation package based on their life cycle state. So in my example, as you'll see, it'll be content that's in the release state that will be included in the translation package. And so if there are some of the documents that are not yet ready to be translated, those would not be included in the package. For reference, a PDF version of the object, so that's either the structure or the data map, can be included if it exists. And you can define which objects should be translated. So for instance, it is possible to exclude graphics if they are set to translate equals no, or other objects if they're set to translate equals no, then they would not be included in the package. And we have gotten requests for this because if graphics are included, then that would make the package quite a bit larger. Also, since many translation vendors charge by the file, you don't want to be sending extra files to be translated. And I just want to speak a minute about XLIFF and how XLIFF is used in SIM translation management. Most of the content is stored as XML dynamic documents, and those documents will be included in the package as an individual file. So each topic, for instance, would be an individual file. But there's additional content that needs to be translated, and in particular in an information structure or a publication structure, the titles of those groups or sections need to be translated. Also in parts lists, the names of the parts might need to be translated. And so what you're able to do is identify which types and which attributes of those types should be translated. And then when you create the translation package for a structure, in that translation package will be an XLIFF file, and that XLIFF file will include the strings that are identified as needing to be translated. So in this screenshot, what we see at the top is the listing of the XLIFF folder. And in this case, there has been an XLIFF that was generated for the information structure. There's one for a parts list, that's the piston and rod group is an XLIFF for a parts list. And then there's an XLIFF that was generated for the publication structure. And in the lower right, you see just a snippet of the XLIFF file. And you can see in this case, it's including some of those titles that are in the information structure. So some of the information group titles. So the idea is when this XLIFF is sent to the translation vendor, it will come back and the source will still be in the original language and the target will contain the translated strings. And the configuration of which attributes to include in the XLIFF, that's in a configuration file on the Windchill side that's called localizable atset.xml. Okay, now I'm going to go through an example to show the capabilities of SIM translation. I'm going to start with a very simple publication structure. This structure just has two sections, one called Overview, one called Troubleshooting, and it has two topics. The overall publication structure is about a ceiling fan and then troubleshooting how to fix a few potential problems with your ceiling fan. Now you can see in this screenshot that both of those topics have been set to the release state. So that indicates that they are both ready to be translated. This is what the first topic looks like. It has to do with if your ceiling fan is humming, and it contains a fragment, an XML fragment about risk of electric shock when working with electric um, wires. And then it also contains one JPEG about the faceplate. So the structure is the topic, and then a fragment and one JPEG. This is the second topic. It only has one JPEG in it. So it's just got a little bit of text and then the JPEG. And then you can see in the lower screenshot there both of the topics and how they appear in the Arbortext browser, where you've got the XML fragment and then those two JPEG graphics. So I'm going to go ahead and create a translation package for this publication structure. And I will create the target languages I'm selecting are German and Italian. So I'm expecting 2 translation packages to get created. Oh, one thing I'll mention also in this create translation package dialog, you can see that there are options in here. For instance, you can choose which vendor you are using, and what this will do is we'll put the package in a different folder according to which vendor you've selected. You also have the option to create a quote package. In that case, it will create the package, it'll create the zip file, and that will include all of the content that's ready to be translated. But it won't actually create the objects for the translations. The idea being that you want to create the quote package, send it out to different vendors just to find out what the cost is going to be up front. Then once you've selected your vendor, you can then do a regular translation package, and that one will actually create the translated files as well as put them in the zip file ready to be translated. The other option there about package content is that you have 2 options. You can either include what's already approved, so that's what I mentioned earlier, where only those topics that are in the appropriate state will be included in the package. But the other option is that you can wait for all the content to be approved, and in that case the package won't be created until all of the content is ready. In this case, I just went with the first option, even though all of the content is ready to be translated. So now if we look at the translation content table for the publication structure, and this is one of the screens that we have so that you can monitor the progress of your translation. And what we see here, in this case, I am requesting information about the source language being English and target language Italian. And what we can see is that it created translation objects for all of what I showed you. So there's 2 graphics, there's 2 top-level procedures, and the XML fragment. And then at the bottom is the XLIFF for that structure. And we see this here on the table, the source name, the source language, the state of the source object, then the translation name, where you can see the _IT for Italian, the target language, the version of the translation, status of the translation, and then state of the translation. So at this point, they're all in translation because they have not been imported. Now, as far as why were the graphics included in the package, that was that option that I mentioned earlier, where you have the option to set an attribute on the dynamic documents to indicate whether or not they should be translated. And in this case, this attribute called PTCDD translate was set to yes for both of those graphics. So that's why they were included in the package. Probably they shouldn't have been, but for demonstration purposes, I included them in the package. Now, if we look inside the zip file, so this is a listing of the zip file, and in this case, this is the German translation package. These are the files that are included. There's a log file, and you can see a snippet from the log file at the bottom of this slide. There's the manifest, which is basically just an XML version of the log file. Now, the manifest is what Service Information Manager is going to use when it imports to see exactly what was included in the package that's being imported and make sure that it matches what is expected. Then you see the XML document, the graphic, so that's for the first document. Then there's the XML document, graphic, and fragment from that second document, and then the XLIFF, which is included in the package. Now, there is an option that was added that would allow these files to have additional information about the name of the documents that are being translated. In this case, that wasn't turned on. So instead, what we're seeing are the object numbers, or the numbers of the documents in Windchill. So let's say that that package was sent out to the language service provider, and then that zip file was put in the folder where imports are put. That's a watched folder, so when Service Information Manager notices that a zip file has been put in there, it will be opened and the content will be imported. And so what we see here, and this time in the translation content table, I'm looking at English as the source and German as the target language. And we can see now where before the translation version showed A.1, well, now it's showing as A.2 because all of those files were imported and iterated when they were imported. We also see that the translation status now says translated, whereas before it said in translation, and translation state says released. Okay, so let's see what the resulting German PDF looks like. So in this case, this is the published representation dialog box, and on the left, I'm just giving it a name, and then I click on Next and get to the Set Languages tab of the publishing dialog box. In this case, I've only selected German, and nothing is checked, and then I would click on Submit Publish Job. So now let's take a look at the English PDF on the left and the German PDF on the right. And apologies to any German speakers because I realize these are kind of not necessarily good translations, but bear with me on that. What we see here is the table of contents. Now these strings, like the string troubleshooting, that was the name of the publication section. And so the translation for that comes from the XLIFF file. The translation for the word contents, where you see that actually comes from the style sheet because there was nothing, there wasn't a, the word contents in the structure itself, but that is what is it used in the style sheet to indicate the top of a table of contents. And then we see we've got the two procedures. Then if we look at the next page, we see the first procedure was translated, but actually we've got a problem. It looks like the second procedure on the right in the German PDF, well, that's still in English. So that indicates that something went wrong with the translation, and we're going to have to get that fixed by the translation vendor. And as I understand it, that's not that unusual that something might go wrong and, we might need to fix something. So the next thing I'm going to do, just to make sure I understand the problem, is I go into Arbortext Editor, and now you see I'm actually in the libraries and in the translated library where the translated content is stored. I drill down into the German folder for the ceiling fan product and the XML content. And then when I open my German topic, well, yep, sure enough, even though the XML lang shows it as German, and this is the German one, it never got translated by the vendor. So I'm going to have to send this back out to get retranslated and then do a re-import of it. So how can I do that? And there are a few things that we might think to try. So one is I noticed that there was a cancel translation package menu choice. But actually that's not going to work in this case because cancel translation package is what can be done before the package has been imported. So in other words, if your package is still out for translation and you realize there's a problem, you can cancel it at that point, fix the problem, and then generate a new package. That's really the use case for canceling. The second thing I could think about, well, I've got this translated document. I could change its state to in work, and as I just showed, open it in Arbortext Editor and edit it. But really that approach is mainly done when only a minor change is needed. So if for instance, the vendor had essentially, been successful but maybe missed one metadata or one XML attribute, something along those lines, something small, it is always possible to edit the translated document directly. And then, of course, you would want to make sure that the vendor knows that you made that change. So, okay, that's not really right either. The third option is you could revise the source and then send it out to be retranslated. And in that case, you would get a new translation because you've got a new revision. And this is just the way that translation works in Service Information Manager. You can only ever have one translation per revision, where a revision is a major version rather than an iteration, which is a minor version. So we could do this. In this case, though, we know the source is okay. We know that some of the translation was, in fact, okay. And so rather than revise it, especially when we know we've got the Italian out, well, we're not going to go with that approach either. And instead what we're going to do is we're going to set this translation, which we know was bad, which we know, something went wrong with that specific translation. We're going to set that translated document to canceled. And then when we create the new translation package, it will realize that the other document was translated successfully, and it'll give us a package just for that one document that was bad. Okay, so here, this is in Windchill, in Service Information Manager, similar to how we navigated here in Arbortext Editor. Instead, we're going to navigate here using the Windchill UI. Then once we're at the dynamic document, we're going to bring up the Set State dialog, which is what you see at the bottom. and set the translated topic and the translated fragment to the canceled state. Now in this case, we really don't have to send out that graphic again, so we'll leave that as the release state. So just the topic and the fragment we'll set to canceled. Now we're going to create another translation package. So now we would go to the publication structure and create a translation package for that structure. But the logic will know that quite a bit, the other document of the structure, it's already been translated, so it's not included here. Now you'll notice the first thing in the package now is the English PDF file. And so it's included because it had been generated so that I could do that comparison between the English and the German. So now that we've got an available representation that's set to the default, it's included in the package. Then we've got our logs file, and again you can see a snippet from the log file below, the manifest, the one document, and the one fragment. Okay, we send that out to the language service provider, and we get it back. And now that we've imported that package, what you can see is the first two documents here, now they're set to A.3. And once again, they're in the translated and released. Their status is translated, the state is released. So we can see that just those two were brought in and are at A.3. Now one thing to mention about the translated content table, certainly, this is a very small publication structure used for the demo, but the structures can get quite large. And so this slide is showing that you can sort the table using any of these different columns. In this case, it's sorted by the version number. And then also you can show only one type of content. So again, to sort of help with what you're seeing in the table. And this is showing only textual content. The previous one was all content types. You can also show only graphic content, or you can show only XML content. And as I said, this one is showing the textual content. Okay, so now we're going to republish the German, and we saw that before. Okay, good. So now we've got the German content for both of the topics. But actually, there's still a problem in that we're seeing that word caution is in English in both of those. Now, we didn't translate that graphic that has the word caution in it. So the question is, well, where is that one coming from? And the answer is that it's actually part of the style sheet. So if we open this topic in Styler, and I'm not a Styler expert, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here, but we can see that in Styler, in the generated text where the red arrow is pointing, it's pointing to this specific caution.jpg. So really, since we want to be able to use this style sheet for multiple languages, and as we saw, it's got a capability to handle textual GENTEXT in multiple languages. But really the simplest thing we can do at this point is to modify the JPEG so that it would be appropriate in multiple languages. And so what we did was sort of, let's just take that word off and leave it as this. Now obviously this wasn't done by a professional illustrator, and a professional illustrator could probably have done a better job here, but you get the general idea that now if we update this, now we've gotten rid of that English text that was part of the style sheet. Now another question here is, okay, I talked about cancel translation package, and so this is showing how that would work, because we could conceivably cancel the Italian. So if we click on cancel translation package, and then what'll come up is the ability to select languages, and you would select German and Italian because that's what you did. And you can see what'll come up in the Cancel Translation Package dialog is we see the Italian package. But actually, we really don't need to cancel that because really the source was okay. As far as we know, the Italian package should be fine. It really was a mistake that happened in the German translating process. So we'll just skip this. We'll cancel out of this dialog. And then one other topic to mention, two other topics to mention. This is showing the dashboard. So in addition to the translated content table that we spent some time in, there's also the translation dashboard. And what this allows you to do is select languages and then get a readout of the overall status for that language. And it will always show the lowest status, so whatever the least amount of translating for that language. And so in this case, the German of that publication structure, it's been completely translated, so it has translated status. The Italian is still in translation, and it shows in translation status. Now, if we had looked at this table when the German was partially translated, where the one topic had been translated, but the other topic we had set to canceled, it would actually, for German, it would show not requested, because the idea being that one of the topics has not yet been sent for translation because we canceled it. And then if we had looked at the table after we generated the second translation package, this table would show in translation for German because, again, even though some of it has been translated, at least some of the content would be in the process of being translated. Then one last topic. Now, what if we want a multilingual PDF? We've got our publication structure. It's available in English and German. What if we want to combine those in one PDF? Well, the way you do that is you need to create a parent publication structure that you can include that one in. So I created this new publication structure that I called Ceiling Fan Multilingual. And using that insert existing publication structure action, I added in the pub struct that we've been working with during this demo. And then you also can add a table of contents if you wish. So this is showing that structure. It's got the pub struct, a table of contents, and then the other publication structure. Now on that child publication structure, if you use the right-click menu, you see Edit and then Set Multi-Language. So you do have to set that publication structure to be multi-language in order to get your multilingual PDF. So we click on that. Now, when we do the Publish job, we bring up the Publish dialog box again. And then in the Set Languages, you see we've got English first and then German, and it will respect the order that you put those in. And then we click on Multilingual Output. Now do Submit Publish Job, and then what we'll get is one PDF. And as you can see, it first shows the English content, and then it shows the German content. And then, you know, in the subsequent pages would contain the titles and the actual content of the English, followed by the content of the German. So that's what I covered today, and I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Patty. Yeah, we do have a couple questions, but before we get to those, just want to make a quick announcement. I did mention earlier that this was the last webinar before our summer break, but we did want to let you know that we are going to be at LiveWorks coming up right around the corner, June 10th through June 13th here in the Boston area. So we will have a couple of demos on the Extropolis show floor, both in the office and the field are the two names of the pavilion. So if you are going to be at LiveWorks, we look forward to seeing you. Please stop by. So a couple questions. First is, this is a two-part question, Patty. It says, our vendors want to produce a PDF for QC